a good place to start might be the 1930s, right? When you see union density and that rise, and communism and communists being huge in that struggle, right? And their efforts in terms of labor organizing being central to building up that union density. Just take us through the Great Depression, the role that communists played here in the United States in labor organizing in particular.
Yeah, so obviously with the Depression, it was millions of people, working class people, lost their jobs, their homes, their life savings, and it was clear to a lot of people that capitalism just wasn't working, and so they were much more receptive to communism, and the Communist Party USA grew to unprecedented heights. Still marginal overall in U.S. politics, but much more influential than it had ever been, because it wasn't just about ideology. It was actually a very practical and well organized party, and they were especially active in organizing the unorganized in the labor movement and trying to be more inclusive, because before then it was very typical for unions to try to, especially the AFL affiliated unions, to exclude racial minorities and women and immigrants and so-called unskilled workers. And so the CIO was created in 1935 to kind of take advantage of the fact that, just like now, millions of workers were so eager to unionize. Unions were very popular. There was a lot more class consciousness because of the reality of the Depression. And the AFL was not taking advantage of that to go out and put in the resources to organize millions of workers in the auto industry and steel industry and electrical industry and others. So the CIO kind of broke away from the AFL and went about organizing these millions of previously unorganized workers and successfully unionizing the biggest corporations in the country at the time, which is sort of like the equivalent of if Amazon and Walmart and McDonald's were like unionized totally wall to wall in a few years. Like, that's basically what was happening. And the CIO welcomed in, or at least tolerated, communist union organizers because they were such dedicated and effective organizers, whereas the AFL, having always been more conservative, had totally kind of shunned communists and other radicals. But the CIO welcomed them in the 30s and 40s. So then coming out of, after the end of World War II in 1945 and kind of the beginning of the Cold War, the rivalry between the US and Soviet Union, a lot of unions within the CIO were led by communists, or at least, communist fellow travelers and allies. And they were not eager to have this Cold War standoff. They thought this would only serve to benefit corporate America by being able to divide the working class and focus more on, militarism and war and imperialism. And the CIO leader, non-communist leaders, kind of made a political calculation. And obviously this is the period of McCarthyism and the Red Scare and the Taft-Hartley Act being passed, this broad anti-union law. So the CIO's non-communist leaders made this calculation that they would be better off just purging all the communists and expelling 11 communist-led unions from the CIO. And I think it was a really dramatic and unfortunate turning point for the labor movement, where things started to kind of go into decline. The CIO became a shell of its former self. It lost like a quarter of its membership through these purges, and then just kind of limped along for a few more years and joined the AFL to become the AFL-CIO. And it was really kind of just crystallized with the CIO from the beginning that they were politically against any kind of leftism. It was kind of born out of the Cold War. And to some extent, that's still a problem. Like, another important book that recently came out is Hamilton Nolan's book, The Hammer, where he criticizes the contemporary AFL-CIO for not doing enough to put forward the resources and energy to help organize the millions of workers who are really ready to go. They're trying to organize on their own in many cases, and they just need some institutional backing. And it's not happening. And so I think that's tied to this history that I'm talking about in this book.